So welcome back to Heal the Sports World once again, everyone. And today I have a very special guest on the channel, one of the absolute best in the MMA media world right now, the one and only James Lynch. How's it going, James?
Oh, well, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, so we'll obviously talk a little bit about the fights from this past weekend, but before everything else, I just wanted to ask you quickly, how did you get involved in this line of work and pretty much got yourself engaged into this MMA world in the first place?
Sure. So I got in it I've always wanted to be a broadcaster, a reporter, journalist since I was a young age. I wanted to go and cover hockey, actually. And then when I got into university, I ended up watching The Ultimate Fighter the first season, and I became an MMA fan like instantly. And then from there, when I was looking at sort of going into the field, I decided to go into MMA. And it just so happened at the time I was living in Toronto in Canada, and the Fight Network was there, and I ended up interning there, and then I ended up getting hired, and that was sort of my first sort of experience in the industry. And then fast forward a few years later, I ended up freelancing on the side, doing some interviews, and that was going really well, like Skype interviews just with fighters and stuff, because I always wanted to be on camera and always wanted to do interviews. And so I started doing that, built up a brand a bit, and then fast forward to 2017, became a dad for the first time. I had another day job that was sort of paying my bills, and I couldn't do both because obviously being a dad, you got to use that time up. So I just quit my day job and then went full time at this, just working for a number of different outlets, and that's pretty much what I've been doing since then. I make my living interviewing fighters, and I basically just provide interviews for a number of different companies and outlets, and that's how I make this full-time living for me.
All right, so you just said that you love interviewing fighters. Of course, we've seen a lot of interviews on your channel, on other channels as well. Do you have any particular fighter you've always enjoyed interviewing?
Yeah, I don't think it's any secret. People know that one of my favorite fighters of all time is Gegard Mousasi, and he's one of my favorite interviews as well because I just don't think there's anyone really like him. He's got a very unique sense of humor. I like his fighting style. I think he's very interesting. That it looks like he's just getting up from a nap and he goes to fight. He reminds me of Fedor a bit that way, where he's just very emotionless going into the cage, and yet he can still put on these great performances. So Gegard is not only one of my favorite fighters, but one of my favorite fighters to interview as well.
Okay, all right. So this past weekend, we saw UFC 271, big main event between Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker, of course. After the fight, I saw your live stream as well after the event, and after the fight, a lot of people on social media claiming that Rob might have won that fight, and Rob himself told the media that he thinks that he did enough to get the victory. What did you exactly make of Izzy and Rob's respective performances from that fight?
I thought it was a close fight. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say that Izzy, came away and there's no question that he won the fight. It was a very close fight. Was it a robbery? Absolutely not. I think what it really comes down to, it seems to me, from a lot of people, is that fourth round, right? Because I think clearly Whittaker won round 2, he won round 5, but that fourth round was the one that was a little bit interesting. But what comes down to me is really the significant strikes, and that's where Adesanya did outland Whittaker a lot. I know there was some school of thought that Whittaker was close to finishing the fight when he had Izzy's back standing, and with the choke, but it really wasn't in that much, and Adesanya did a great job sort of defending that, and I feel like people aren't giving Adesanya enough credit for that. So I can understand it. A lot of people are passionate. They like Whittaker. He's a fan favorite. I just have a hard time thinking that he won the fight. I feel like when I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, Izzy won that for sure, no problem. I know Rob did get his takedowns, but I think you gotta, just because you get one takedown in a round, that shouldn't negate the amount of striking that was done by Adesanya in the fight. So I get it. Fans are passionate. I don't think it was a robbery. I think it was a very close fight. And I think the rightful winner was determined.
Yeah, it was basically it was a very calculated performance from Izzy, I think. Not the striking masterclass we're used to seeing from him. And I think that's what people got talking about it. They thought that Whittaker might have won that fight.
And I think too, yeah, and there's also this narrative that it wasn't a great fight. I disagree. I mean, Adesanya was coming forward. He was landing a lot of kicks. It was an entertaining fight. Is it a fight of the year? Absolutely not. But I thought it was still a very, like you said, calculated performance from Adesanya. This idea that it was close to what happened with Yoel Romero, I disagree with that. I think people are forgetting who Adesanya is fighting. He's fighting guys that are really tough to put away. Vettori, Whittaker's. Whittaker's only been finished one time, and it's by Adesanya at middleweight. I know he's finished at welterweight, but I think it just goes to show the level of opposition he's fighting is really good, and that's part of the reason why you're not seeing these highlight reel finishes, because the guys he's fighting are really good. So that's what I sort of chalk it up to.
Yeah, did you see any significant approach in Robert Whittaker's style in this fight compared to the first fight with Izzy?
Well, yeah, and I think you just saw him tone it down a bit. I mean, he wasn't fighting as recklessly, where he was, vulnerable to getting hit. I think that the first fight was more of a firefight. This one, I think Whittaker knew, look, the stakes are high here. I don't want to lose again. He had a great game plan. I mean, like I said, he implemented the takedowns very well. I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to take Adesanya down, because I felt part of the reason that Jan Blachowicz had so much success was because he was much bigger and much stronger than Adesanya, whereas Whittaker, I mean, he used to fight at welterweight, right? So you think just based off that he would have trouble getting him down, but to his credit, he got it. So there is a weakness in Adesanya. We do know that he was able to take him down a couple times in the fight, but the question is, can you do anything with it? If this was like Damian Maia in his prime, we'd be talking about a much different fight here, because I think Maia would have more success when he gets those submission holds. Rob's not really known as a submission guru, so to speak. So I thought Rob's approach was fine. I just think that you got to be extraordinary to beat a guy like Adesanya.
Yeah, I think Rob looked a lot more calm and composed, and I think he was very cautious early on in that fight, and I think it was sort of visible in that first round as well.
I agree. Yeah. No, very good fight. I thought both guys brought it, and I think they are the two best middleweights in the world.
Yeah, so Izzy is probably going to fight Jared Cannonier next, I believe. He said he wants to return in June, but big question here is, who do you think Robert Whittaker should be fighting next?
Yeah, there's a few options. I think you can go with Whittaker. Marvin Vettori's in a similar situation, having lost twice to Adesanya. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a fresh matchup that hasn't taken place yet. Sean Strickland's out there. He just picked up a big win over Jack Hermanson. I think if you wanted to push Sean Strickland a bit, give him Whittaker and see if he's really ready for those contenders fights. I mean, Hermanson was a good win, but I think, you beat a Whittaker. That really says a lot about the division. And then I think there's Derek Brunson out there. I mean, Brunson just lost a pretty key fight to Cannonier. They fought on the same card. Why not do that matchup again? That would be a rematch, because, of course, Whittaker beat him years ago, but I think that's a fight that, both are much different fighters now. I'd be interested with that. So I think there's a lot of options for Rob going forward.
I think they could rebook Rob versus Paulo Costa maybe, if Paulo stays in middle.
Yeah, exactly. Paulo, there's another, and you know what? I forget about him because he didn't fight at he didn't fight at 185 in his last fight. So yes, he's another option as well too, considering he's coming off a loss too.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Any other fights or performances that caught your attention from UFC 271?
Yeah, I got to give credit to Tai Tuivasa. I think, most heavyweights would have been finished in that first round. He hung in there. He took some serious shots from Lewis and then came back and won the fight in the second in Lewis's hometown. Very impressive. It's crazy to think that Tuivasa now will go from ranked number 11 to number 3. He should anyways with the rankings, because that's where Lewis was. So he's, big things ahead for him. I would love to see him fight Cyril Gane. I think that would be an interesting fight next for Tuivasa. Just, beating Lewis is a nice feather in his cap. I thought, Jared Cannonier, we talked about that a little bit. I mean, just the fact that he ran into some trouble in that first round with Cannonier, or with Brunson, I should say, and was, in that submission hold at the end of the round. I mean, if that goes on a little bit longer, who knows if we're talking about a Derek Brunson loss or not. And then I'd say the other fight that really stood out for me was, I thought Casey O'Neill did a good job in her fight against Roxanne. I know she was taken down a few times, but, still, Roxy's one of those fighters that will make good fighters look bad, and I think Casey put on a good performance. And I don't know what that judge was thinking, giving the fight to Roxanne. I don't see how any way she could have won that. I thought Casey clearly won the fight. So it was a really good card overall. I know there's a lot of submissions, a lot of decisions. Finally, we get the back-to-back knockouts to really sort of make this card what it was, but a good card overall.
Yeah, big win for Renato Moicano as well with that submission speaking about.
Yes, yeah, no, he looks great, and I was on the wrong side of that one going in. I figured Hernandez might be able to knock him out, but Moicano, he did a good job using his range and everything, and he's got a really good ground game. I mean, Alex Hernandez had never been submitted in his career prior to Saturday night, so that's a nice feather in Moicano's cap. It looks like he's turning a corner here, because he had some the losses to Aldo and Zombie, and I know there was that 145, but then he got knocked out by Fiziev as well. So we'll see how he does when he fights like a Brad Riddell or someone that's ranked higher that has some knockout power. We'll see how that goes, but I think Moicano is another guy that could really turn things around in the division.
All right, so for the next pay-per-view, obviously headlined by someone who have interviewed many times in the past, Colby Covington, and set to fight Jorge Masvidal at UFC 272. Any early predictions you have maybe for that fight?
Yeah, I think Covington's going to win that one. I have seen some people say, will Masvidal do what he did to Askren? It feels like the same thing. I think that's not even close. I think Colby's a much better fighter than Ben Askren is. I think having trained with Masvidal too, Colby's not going to shoot for the takedown right away. Look, Colby's stand-up has improved a lot. Just look at the fact that he was able to stand and trade with Usman, and Usman knocked Masvidal out. Like, I think people are forgetting just how close Colby's fight with Usman was. And even the first fight, I thought it was pretty even going into the 5th round when Usman eventually finished him. And I think they were much closer than the fights that Masvidal have. Look, Masvidal, let's call it what it is. I mean, he had a pretty interesting path to the title. He knocks out Askren, he beats Nate Diaz, and then he fights Usman. He never had to fight, Burns or Luque or any of these really top guys in the weight class. And I think there's such a gap between the top and some of those other guys that I think Colby should win this. I mean, not only stand-up wise, I think Colby can hold his own. I think there's an easy path to victory with the wrestling. And this idea that Masvidal is going to knock out Colby early, I just don't see it. Masvidal does not knock his opponents out very early. I know he knocked out Darren Till, but he's not known as like a guy to finish fights early. And I just don't see that happening here with Colby. He's just too smart to fall for that game plan. I think Colby will probably win a decision, but he'll do so in dominant fashion.
Yeah, a big few weeks coming up for the UFC, to say the least. You got the fight nights, and then you have UFC 272, of course. Co-main event, big 5-round fight as well now, between Fiziev and Rafael Adesanyas.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that one. It's too bad we're not seeing it this weekend, but that's going to be a really exciting fight on the 272 card. And I think Fiziev wins that one, but you never know with RDA, right? Like, my issue with RDA is that he's just been so inactive. He's getting up there in age. You would think the new blood could do something, but then we've seen, Fiziev, like that fight against Bobby Green in that 3rd round. He struggled a bit in that 3rd round. He did end up getting the win, but we'll see, in a 5-round fight how he does against a former champion in Rafael Adesanyas. So I'm really excited for that fight. That's a really, really good fight on paper.
All right, James, I know you have to go. So before I let you go, one final question. Do you have like any advice for people like me who try to succeed in this line of work and, who generally look up to you and some other guys in this industry as well?
Well, I appreciate that very much. I love what I do, and it's so cool that other people like watch my content and stuff. So thank you for that, first off. But yeah, my advice is just, be consistent. I see a lot of people will do a bunch of, content and then they disappear for a couple months. Try and do something every week. Try and be consistent with your content. Try and build that brand and try and find new angles. Like, there's a lot of areas of MMA that don't get as much coverage because people look at it and think, oh, well, I'm not going to get the views on it. That's not the way you got to look at it. It's a long game. You've got to find different ways to cover the sport because everyone's doing UFC previews. They're doing UFC picks and UFC interviews. They all get lost in the shuffle. So you got to find ways to stand out. Find whatever that is you enjoy doing and double down on it, whether it's interviews or, writing or whatever. Double down on that as much as you can. Utilize what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and just be patient because it's not an easy industry. Like, even me doing this full time, like, I think I'm the only guy in the industry right now who's doing it full time, mainly just doing video interviews. There's a lot of full-time writers and all that. But as far as just doing video, I'm one of the only freelancers. There's people who work at like, Junkie and Fighting and stuff, but I don't think there's anyone like me just doing videos. So it just goes to show you can make your own job if you need to, but you just got to be patient. That's my biggest advice.
All right. Like I said, you're one of the absolute best in the game right now. And thank you so much for your time, James. This was, in fact, the first interview I got on my channel. So thank you so much for that.
Nice.
And yeah, so I'll let you go. You can check out James Lynch on his YouTube channel, and you can follow him on Instagram as well. Would you like to give a shout out or like drop your IG handle?
Just at Lynch on Sports. That's LYNCH on Sports, all one word. That's my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports, Instagram, Twitter. I'm really easy to get a hold of. If anyone's watching this wants, to hit me up for any advice or whatever, more than happy to talk about that type of stuff, which is totally fine on my end. And thanks so much for having me on. Good first interview, man. Good questions. I really like the pace of this thing. So you're doing so far so good. Let me just say that.
All right. Thank you so much, James. I appreciate the time.
Thanks, man. Appreciate the time too. See ya.